Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Good afternoon, all our audience across the world. Thank you for joining us again. Which Dr. Tony Shobeson will be delivering today on culture, architecture, and design. We ask you to listen attentively to her. Dr. Shobeson, please. Hello, Dr. Shobeson.
Okay.
You can go on now.
Yes, please. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. And I want to say a big thank you to the because you are hub for the beautiful work they're doing to help us lend our voices on issues affecting architecture. For today's series, we'll be from Damas Leeds. Culture is the author and receiver of all indigenous relevant culture to receive and cultivate all Good. Yes. So it says, let us try the culture option to rediscover what we had before, our contacts with the outside world, because the aesthetics and philosophy of our indigenous cultures dictates our true relevant need in life, which are evolved patterns of living over time. After satisfying our basic needs of comfortable living, every other consumption is an exotic icing on the cake of life. In this seminar, we'll be looking to answer 3 basic questions. And I will look at what makes up culture, how culture influences architecture, and how these cultural features can be included in contemporary design. To start off with, I would like to define the term itself, culture. What then is culture? According to anthropologists, Clocan and Goetz, they've brought up these 11 ways of looking at culture. And from these 11 ways, we'll be able to find a definition, a working definition for us. It says that the total way of life of a people is a social legacy an individual acquires from his group, is a way of thinking, feeling, and believing, a theory on the part of anthropologists about the way a group of people behave, a stored house of pooled learning, a set of standardized orientation to recurrent problems, learned behavior, a mechanism for the normative of behavior, a set of techniques for adjusting both to other men, and a precipitation of history. From all these points that they've put down, I've looked at culture as the whole way of life of a people, which includes their artifacts and their technology. This could be in form of inherited artifacts, technical process, idea, habit, and value utilized in making the environment conducive. Though culture could be intangible as expressed through learned behavior, it can be made tangible through art, science, and technology, which invariably means that culture of each society is identified through its manifestations such as language, the art, and architecture. Language, these are the terms they use in defining the different structures or different tools that they will use in putting things together, their artifacts as well as their technology. The changing the cultural and social attitudes in communities also has greatest impact on its architecture. For instance, we will see as colonization, as we moved from pre-colonial to colonization, our consumption attitude also changed. What we wanted, what we felt was good and valued also changed. And this changed the way we started to build and started to see our built environment. Therefore, culture plays an important role in promoting architectural identity. Hence, architecture is a complete symbol of human culture. If we've already accepted culture to be a total way of life of a people and how they've interacted with the environment, then the main question will be, what is architecture? So architecture, if the term is to be useful as a cultural category, must be defined as a totality of a people's built environment, and therefore includes simple as well as the complex structures. So it's not just the gigantic buildings that we have or structures that we have, such as the National Theatre, but also our residential buildings as well are included in this. Architecture as a matter of human life reflects the culture in every society, interacting closely with structural, the way we build, the elements of our building, historical, how we moved from traditional to vernacular, and then to colonial and post-colonial structures, political situations. When the colonials were here, their structures were so big that they showed their ingenuity as well as their superiority. The economic and social feature of the society, like most of us want to be in places that are secluded and tagged, maybe such as banana or purple or blue islands. And finally, architecture is a manifestation and expression of culture. If we've now seen the interrelationship between the definition of culture and architecture, where does design sit in this? Design in itself is a process. And the process of design is to create an environment that suits the users and is thus user-oriented. So design must be based on knowledge of how people and environment interact. Therefore, design needs to respond to culture. So we will see that from all these terms that we've looked at, culture is the dominant feature in all the three of them. Culture is dominant in defining our architecture, and culture is also dominant in the design processes that we take in putting in bounding the practices or the methods of building together. So the next is to see what then are the cultural influences that brings about these architectural designs or design processes or architectural identity. This diagram just shows that culture influences architectural design as well as design process. The design process itself is the approach with which we solve the architectural problems or the brief, what we call the brief, but it has to respond to culture. There are some factors that constitute cultural influences in our environment, as well as other cultures worldwide. And they are architectural forms and relationship of building and spaces act as cultural markers. The spaces, how the spaces are used according to each ethnic group or each culture, they're culture specific. The climate and the environment, the use of courtyard, as in bringing in the outdoor-indoor situation, the use of murals, ornamentation on our buildings to tell a story, to give a visual, to communicate visually and just beautify our environment, as well as indigenous readily available material. To interact with all these points quite deeply, I'll be looking at two ethnic groups. I'll be looking at the Yoruba ethnic group specifically. I'll be looking at the Palace of the Alafin of Oyo. And then I'll look at the Igbo just generally. And the reason being, there's a relationship between the cultures here in Nigeria, the major cultures, as well as the ethnic groups. So there are about 400 ethnic groups in Nigeria, but I'll be dealing with these major ones. And then on Thursday, the panelists will deal with more. First and foremost, we'll be looking at the Yoruba cultural form. The Yoruba cultural form is always normally a square form, which is based on their belief system that the universe has 4 points, is made up of 4 major points, Igun Mary. So they build, no matter how they build or form the courtyard, it might be units, little units put together to form a courtyard or to form a agbole. They're all in square format or square shaped. So they will always have the 4 major corners. And we're not going deep into that Yoruba cosmology for today, but I'll be using the, excuse me, the Palace of the Alafin to denote and describe some of those Yoruba cultural forms, to look at the murals, to look at the way they brought that, the outdoor-indoor situation to solve the environmental condition. This site layout was drawn in 1937, and activities are still going on to make sure we capture the whole of the palace now as they're redecorating and preserving, and construction is going on presently. And the palace constitutes 26 courtyards. These courtyards are used for different purposes, from handling little meetings to big meetings, to festivals, to family gatherings, and for storage, and so on. So if we go further, you will see the entrance, the main entrance into the palace shows you the use of mural on the walls. The Oyo people are the main ethnic group that are considered Yoruba. They were the ones identified by the term Yariba. So it is just natural that they're the ones we're looking at today. And on this mural, you will see birds, the different animals that are represented in Yoruba spirituality, as well as in their history. And all these tales of different activity that goes on even within the palace of the Alaafin. These murals are made as a remembrance of things they've gone through, the different Alaafins that come forth, as well as the different belief system, the different divinities that the Yoruba people worship. And the palace, we will see the picture on the, that'll be my right. On the right, it's a picture of the earlier 20th century, which we'll find online as well. And as at this point, we will see that it had the roof of the palace outer wall was made of thatch. However, through cultural, societal changes and acceptance of new material and synthesizing it into their own way of life, they've changed this roof. You will see the picture on the left side to show the roofing shades. From the roofing shades, today, Alaafin's palace is kind of changing to bring in the new building materials, such as a long aluminum roofing shade. And you will see these changes have not taken, looking at this, the effect of an architect, but the people themselves have thought of ways of evolving the culture and preserving it as they go by. The picture below just shows us the cultural effect of the colonials. This pavilion, which is called Aganju, was built in the time of Ladigolu the first, and it was built during the colonial period. As much as it's a colonial structure, it is also in that square format. It is a rectangular, a square building, a square structure in front of the palace. Sadly, it kind of covers the beauty of that long, unbroken wall of the palace, and is the first sight you see when you get into the palace compound itself. These pictures show us just one of the very many of the 26 courtyard system. This particular courtyard system is not used for ventilation purposes of aerating, because you will note on the screen that there are no windows. So these are the major walls, the initial walls of the palace. And these walls are mud structures, and you can see that they're not straight. Sadly, they've tried to merge the present day beautification elements like the tiles, the finishes, to this mud structure. And you can see it has its effect at the end of the day. They've replaced all the wooden posts that held the roof in place with the columns that we see today. The Alaafin has tried to modernize or work on the palace as best as it can to keep the Yoruba heritage, the form, going. This particular courtyard is used for meetings. There's another hall we're looking just ahead over there, is used for meetings of the chiefs and other festivals. So below is on the wall, they tell a story. They're not just for decoration purposes. They tell a story. Some of them are abstract, but they still tell a story. Towards the end, you see the head of a masquerade. So there's a story being told, the visual representations of what happens in the palace, the joyous mood. There's music, dancing, festivals, and so on. Below are the totems and the roof posts from Oyo-Ile. Sadly, they're weathering away. But from the carvings, we will see art again coming to play. They use these carvings to tell the story of what has happened over time. Sometimes we find the head of a human head, a representation of the head at the topmost of the totems. Oftentimes, it depicts the importance that the Yorubas have placed on the head, as in the importance of the head to the Yoruba people. Going forward, we'll see that in this case, the cultures influence the way they use the courtyard, cultures influence the way they use the murals, and cultures influence the way the spaces. So within the Yoruba setting, you always find square buildings, square forms, which helps to work properly in the orientation of bringing in the cool air as well as letting out the used air. And it also helps in bringing in, the courtyard helps in bringing that communal feel within the buildings where people can meet, have dance festivals or folk tales, folk laws around the palace. I will move on from the palace now to just touch on the Igbo cultural forms, which are somewhat similar with the Yoruba.
Hello, hello. We having a little network issue. You will join us within the next few minutes. Appreciate that. We're still in the third world nation. So occasionally we have this kind of lapses. So she will join us soonest as we delve into Igbo culture perception, and we'll round up soon. So let's just give her some few minutes to join the system that is from her end, and we'll be able to get her very soon. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, going forward on the Igbo cultural forms. Their forms are usually circular or oval. They also use squares or rectangle, as well as they use murals, wall painting. Their forms evolve as societal needs changes and new additional spaces were required, because initially they were hunters and then they moved on to being agrarian society and stayed longer in a location. So shelter began to expand to sense more specialized functions such as food storage, commerce, religious ceremonies, and festivals. So, and this brought about the new shapes where families have to stay in a unit or as clans. They had verandas and they used forked posts to carry the roof. And one major thing that is so common between the Igbos and the Yorubas and some other ethnic groups is that wall decoration. They will always have that visual representation to have the beautiful image, that image, and tell a story. And whenever within the Igbo society, we have the women who do the uli painting. And the uli paintings. And whenever within the uli paintings, these are abstract design that consist of linear forms and geometrical shapes and symbols. Their colors are usually black, white, yellow, and red, and it creates this visual impact. But when animals, they're not sacred in themselves, but when animals and birds are used, it shows that shows the significance of that wall as and it signifies divinity as well as determines the symbolism of the wall itself. And they also make sure that their walls are also designed. We'll see the patterns on the walls. The walls are never left plain or bare whenever the designs are finished, just like the Yoruba ones as well. There are designs on them in different patterns, depending on the owner of the house, depending on his status, depending on his group, if he's an OB. It really depends on what that clan is into. And you could tell a story of a people through their doors, their designed walls at a glance. So in looking at these two ethnic groups is just to be able to portray the fact that culture affects the kind of forms that we'll use. As the society changes, the forms also evolves with them to be able to bring together those elements that make living conducive for the people. Before we look at this, okay, why then, if we've looked at culture and look at its uniqueness as well as its influences on different aspects or different cultures of Nigeria, the question would be, why is Nigerian culture not an influencing factor in our architectural design? One of the reasons, out of all those reasons which we'll go through, one of it is a value system. And that takes me forward to this picture. What do you see when you think culture and architecture in Nigeria? You think first, what comes to your mind, the value system, is this mud building that is not going to stand the test of time, that you're so ashamed or you don't want to be part of, that you don't want to tell anyone that you live in or you know who lives in it. And oftentimes when we visit the villages, you will hear most of them look forward to pulling down these mud structures for the fanciful cement, concrete blocks that they want their houses to look like the city. Only few of them know or value the importance of these materials. To the left is in Hausa hut, found in Oyo. The very interesting bit about that particular hut or hut system, it's a whole compound, but I've just taken out one of it, is they are in a foreign land. They are not indigenous of Oyo, but they've brought their own way of building. They've looked for these materials within the environment and built to suit their culture, their identity. As soon as you meet with them, you could tell, they tell a story, you could tell the kind of people they are, that they're nomads, but this particular group are going to be staying a long time. And that's why they've built this thatch structure. So our value system is warped. Our value system is problematic where we do not appreciate where we're coming from. And that way we actually don't have a point of where we're going, but we're just moving. We're actually on a roller skate. We're just moving and moving with time, but not keeping anything as part of our heritage or collecting anything as part of our identity. Another factor that is not letting Nigerian culture to influence our architecture is the way of seeing our perception. We want to be seen as people of status, and we don't want to be associated with the rural or indigenous or local areas. And sadly, it's making us to lose focus of moving these local materials forward through technology to make them better. Poor or lack of understanding of the importance of what we have within our society or within our local terrain or within the indigenous society. Poor and obsolete architectural curriculum and pedagogy is another major factor where students they're not open or exposed to the past, and allow them the ability, and give them that chance to be able to think through the process, the theories, the philosophies that surrounds the way most of the structures have been built in the past, and then think through modalities or ways or technology that they can use to make these materials become durable and lasting for the future. Lastly is lack of creativity and ingenuity. Sadly, our architecture has started becoming cut and paste instead of it being creativity, fun, and the creation or the ingenuity of bringing up spaces that are functional in themselves. Imagine having a home. What is the importance of building this gigantic structure that cannot function without electricity and without electricity or artificial ventilation? That is not who we are. We are Africans, Yorubas, Igbos, Hausas, Efiks, and we're outdoor people. So whatever design that we come out with, whatever process we go through, is not only listening to the architect at the beginning of the design, but listening also to the people and being able to bring together that idea that will infuse the people's thoughts, their way of life, their way of thinking, their way of life, their way of using the spaces within our designs. In Europe, architecture was one of the creative forms of expression, and that's why today we study the Gothic, the Romanesque, and all these areas of architectural designs and feats. Architectural approach for them was to teach the subject not like craftsmanship without creativity, but they allow the use and understanding of art in making creativity part of their architectural essence. We shouldn't forget that art in itself is broad. So there are different parts of art that can bring about the creativity and ingenuity in our architectural designs. Going forward, I'm certain most of us here will be familiar with this saying. And this, sadly, is our reality. I will want us to forget the Ikoyis, the secluded, little well-planned places where everyone want to be. This is the reality of Nigeria today, where we don't have architectural identity, where everything is, it's eclectic in its design identity. And all these designs lack art. And I know instantly someone will say, oh, it's not done by an architect. But I know an architect lives close by some of these buildings. Going forward, the question then will be, don't we have architects in Nigeria? Are they not culturally informed? Are they not influenced by it? Are they ashamed of what our past is? Are they not looking at ways of bringing our past into our present? The beautiful question is we have so many, but out of this beautiful few, I will say, a brave few, I will love to talk on two people. One of them is Oluwole Olumoyiwa. who studied abroad, is a Nigerian, born Nigerian, studied abroad. And after about 9 years of touring Europe, working in different European outfits and looking at African outfits, came back to Lagos to set up his own outfit. And with a conscious effort to go back to his old Yoruba tradition. And this is simply because he knows the culture, he's lived in the culture, and he's intended to take the culture forward by representing it within his architectural designs. So what did Muyiwa do? What did Oluwole Olumuyiwa do? He made meaningful use of indigenous materials. When we talk about culture, what comes to mind first is materials. We forget the artistic impressions. We forget how these forms get to become. That architecture itself is a visual art. The only thing is it's that structure that stands just in your face that you must take note of. So it's a visual art, an impression, a lasting impression of our culture. Oluwole Olumuyiwa also used traditional cross ventilation through the use of breathing walls. For most of the schools he designed, like the engineering department, the College of Engineering and University of Ibadan, he used breathing walls. So there was always cross ventilation in his designs. He also used the integration of outdoor spaces. So many times he brought in the outdoor spaces into the indoor. And the next architect I'll be looking at is Damas Nwoko. Damas Nwoko is still living. Oluwole Olumuyiwa is late, but his work still speaks. Damas Nwoko, on the other hand, is we'll see him purely as the man who created the modern style of Nigerian architecture by using natural synthesis. And this natural synthesis is by looking at things from other cultures that he can marry with the host culture to create a comfortable dwelling. All Damas Nwoko's work was to reflect nature as much as it can, because nature to him inspires his creativity. And above all, the main aim of Damas Nwoko's architecture was comfortable dwelling that addressed African climate and African environment. So his designs were not to bring in the artificial cooling system, the new ACs that are being imported, or the noise that we use in polluting the environment by using generators, but he looked at ways of creating comfortable dwellings that addressed African climate and environment. He looked at the aesthetic of technology that bestows a value on each product that was based on the culture that forms it. Because for him, culture evolves out of necessity to provide comfort for members of the society. His works are powerfully expressive, and above all, they are Nigerian. By extension, they represent Africa. So we could take his work from Nigeria and put elsewhere, or use his ideology of architecture and use it to build elsewhere, and we'll still achieve a comfortable kind of dwelling. This is one of Damas Nwoko's work in the Dominican Institute, and this picture was taken by Dr. Delis during our visit. And I will just want us to take time to look at how he's used the cross in the stone structure to bring in light into the space. And the buildings naturally fit with their environment because he's used the indigenous materials to build. We'll see art come to play, like the building behind has the mud artwork, more like a child's play, but that allows in air and allows visibility. So even if you're inside, it allows in light as well as allows in air. This is the communal building in the Dominican Institute. And as a result of his thoughtfulness of his design, we can see the soundness of his structure as well as the elegance of the finishing. And what comes to your mind will be, are this finishing only for the exterior? And the answer will be no. This is the monastery itself, the church. And we could see how he's used the local materials to bring about this beautiful facade, the aesthetic. The elements of the exterior wall allows in light, natural lighting into the space, whereby there really is no need, really won't be a need for electricity, as in the artificial lighting system. And he's achieved this so well using just indigenous material. This is the interior of the church. And behind, from the light, we could see those patterned clay abstract work. But inside, he's brought in the ingenuity of Africa, the ingenuity of who we are, the carvings, the totem poles, which serves as columns inside this auditorium, as well as the pulpit, speaks a lot about his artistic inclination, and they bear witness to who we are as Nigerians. From the door, from the initial door that you enter this space, you start to see art at work, and you start to recognize it as part of your tradition and as a part of the culture one has grown up in. When we saw the Alaafin's palace the other time, we could feel that it's just on the outside. But Damaswoko is moved this so much into the contemporary architecture by also bringing designs inside. This is a church, so he's used the cross as part of the design on this wall. And we could see how the outside is brought in with the light from the roof, brought in into this particular building. The building does not only function as a church, but in itself, the beauty, the serenity, you want to just come in and stay. And that is what the African home, the African designs are meant to be. This is the totem pole again, but that serves more as a column. And on the abstract carving, the artwork depicts a real African origin. And they're of different styles and shapes within the interior of this church. Damaswoko did not only do that, he also designed the art center in Ibadan. So the picture we saw of the more like the cityscape within that same Ibadan, where we've seen all those buildings, there is something within it. There is a building or structures within it that speaks of our identity as Nigerians and as well as Africans. In conclusion, I'll still want to go back to Damaswoko's work and what he says about our architects, that they are not doing well because they're not grounded in the best of what had happened thousands of years ago that served our people well without electricity. Now we build a modern house and there is no electricity or air conditioner, so you suffer in your own house. So why not build what was comfortable? The creative ones does not create works to be housed in museums. The creative ones takes from what has been done and move the society forward. It is my hope that through this short discussion, it could strike up or kickstart a discourse of us looking inward as architects, looking inward and looking back to our heritage, not just our heritage or cultural heritage, but the way we build those structures, those tools that make our building last a test of time, that they were being used long before the colonial masters came, and they're still even in place today in areas, in local areas like Oyo and the other villages, that we could still go back and see how these elements work, and then sit down and look at them and work on them through technology to make them better in going forward. So it is high time for us to stop looking out, but to look inward and become more creative, as well as being informed about our past. Thank you. I would At this point, I'd like to entertain any question. Any questions?
Hello. Any questions? Any
I can hear
questions,
you.
please, for her on culture and architecture and design?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Hello. Any questions
Yes.
for Dr. Toyin, please, from our audience on culture, architecture, and design? If you want to ask a question, can you raise up your hand? Maybe we can see you. You can unmute yourself and talk. Joseph? Joseph, yes? Can we hear your question, please? Unmute yourself, Joseph.
I can't hear anyone.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah? Unmute. How do I unmute here? I can't.
Bode, unmute yourself.
You unmute yourself. Okay, you're on. It's okay.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
we can
Hello?
hear you. Can you speak?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are questions on the message sent in. Can you just read them? There
Oh,
are
okay.
questions
On
sent
the
in.
chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Or maybe I should read out this. Hello? This is from
Yeah, go on.
Chuka Ihono.
Okay.
I believe that we place too much emphasis on the visual of Africanness. Toyi, what do you think?
I disagree that we place too much emphasis on that, because it's more about synthesis, the natural synthesis. If we, instead of depending on the outside for our identity, is actually looking inward. There are some things that's been introduced to us and that are quite useful for us in this terrain. So it's to take up all this and merge it into our own cultural identity or our own way of life, and then, you know, be able to propagate that outside. So it's not just the visuals of Africanness, so to speak,
Okay.
but what actually makes us African. Let me use a typical building as an example. As an African, with the way we cook and with the smell of the things we cook, we actually need a door in our kitchen to go out. We can't use the same door that brings us in to take us out. But with Europe, we have houses where it's just one door. If you don't, you know, if you live in a flat or you just have one door that brings you in and out, because within that system, you don't really cook this kind of meals that will stick, or the smell will stick onto your clothing. So it's just looking at the culture, looking at what really works for us, and then merging it into what is already working. If you look at the picture of the Alafin's Palace, if we had preservative or architects who are specialized in preserving our historical heritage, we wouldn't be using the long span aluminum roofing sheet and just joining it at the middle with the old zinc roof and sheet. Instead, we'll look at an option of preservation, and we'll be able to go through the process, which will really be documented for generations yet unborn. So it's not just the Africanness, but really looking at what works with our own terrain. And if that then makes it Africanness or Nigerianness, then so be it.
There's another question again.
Can you hold on, Dr. Adedoyin? Teriba is raising up his hands. Dr. Teriba, please, can you ask Toyin your question?
Okay, Dr. Sugason, thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very wide-ranging presentation. You've answered my question a little bit, but I think I will still raise it. I'll raise it more of a comment as opposed to a question. But again, you have answered it a little bit. But what I want to raise is we should be careful not to think of culture as static. So while I admire tremendously the examples you gave of architect Olumuyiwa and Damason Nwoko, both of them giants in the field of architecture in Nigeria, the quote that you started with, the Damason Nwoko quote about where Nwoko said that we should look at what we have, in other words, culture before colonization came. I would be wary of that, because towards the end of your presentation, you talked about natural synthesis and Nwoko's use of natural synthesis. Professor Laiwola is also on this Zoom call, and she knows that natural synthesis is something appropriated from Nigerian art. Nwoko was part of the Zaria Rebel Society, and different Igbo artists embraced natural synthesis as a marriage of indigenous artistic forms, what was done outside. And so the synthesis is bringing two of them together. Of course, Nwoko has done that himself. And so I just want to encourage everybody, when turning inward, we shouldn't neglect what is outside. And we should embrace that natural synthesis of using the best that is outside, as well as the best, trying to reconfigure what is on the inside. So it's really a comment to buttress what you're saying, per se. But when thinking about looking inwards, we shouldn't look inwards. We should look inwards and outwards and marry the two. That's just the comment I wanted to make. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Teriba. Toyin, actually, Jegede, can you read some of the questions you have again for?
Okay, there's this other question along the same line. It says, if one is new, this from Amina Batagarawa, if one is new to the field of culture and architecture, what are the key literature to start from?
I will say read The Interpretation of Culture by Goetz. That was a good one to start with, because the main thing is we need to have an understanding that culture in itself is not static. It's a total way of life of a people, which means their technology continues to change as things continue to change, or their needs continue to change. Like I made mention of the Igbo people. As they moved from being hunters into being agrarian society, they needed rooms for storage. They needed rooms for different things. When the colonial masters came, a lot of them they actually destroyed most of the shrines, because then they became Christians and the colonial masters didn't want the shrines and the practices. So most of them took that out. Even the Yoruba people as well, within their household, within the compounds, there's always a room, which is a room of worship or of their sacred or the divinity with which that family or that line of worships. So I'll say start up with the interpretation of culture, which is by Goetz. And then you could move on to books on Uche Okeke, who actually started up the natural synthesis movement. And he's a product of the Nigerian School of Art Science, the same Zaria school that produced Demaswonko. Interestingly, the history of architecture book we studied in school, Buckminster Fuller, has nothing about the African cultural buildings in it, aside from the pyramid that is closest to us. So I wouldn't say look at that. Udo Kulterman, I think, the new African architects, that book will be a good one as well, because he looked into Africans from Kenya, all different parts of Africa, and looked at different architects who worked on bringing in their own Afrocentrism into their designs. So that would be a good start.
Okay.
There's another one here.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. What steps are being taken to change the curriculum of our architecture schools to what is actually needed in our society?
I'm not sure if Oluwatoyin can answer that, but that's actually bigger than Oluwatoyin, in fairness. And it's those at the ends of affairs really looking deep and seeing what we need. I'll make an example of Ghana. I was going through a curriculum and I noticed that I think in either year 2 or year 3, they will go out into the indigenous village, into the villages, and their IT was to take up a culture, study how the building, is actually constructed, how they get the mud, how they mix it, at what point do they put the courses and stuff. And that way, what is allowed is allowed academia to flow into the town. So there's a town and gown going on. And by contribution, the students are helping to preserve the heritage of all these indigenous areas. So it's bigger than me, but I'm hopeful that someday soon, architecture, because architecture in itself has different aspects to it. There's the historical part of it. There is the designs. There's so many aspects of it before you even get into materials at all. So I'm hoping that we will be able to open up our history of architecture class and make it more, not only theoretical, but make it very practical. And that way, students can start imagining, start thinking of ways of making these building materials more durable over time.
Okay. Architect Jegede, any more questions?
There is a contribution from Professor Adedoyin Teriba with respect to books that can be studied. He mentioned Ornament and Crime by Adolf Loos.
Yes, Ornament and
I
Crime.
can see.
Thank you, sir.
Before you answer that, please, Dr. Twin, I can still see Dr. Teriba's hands up.
Okay.
Can you speak, sir? Dr. Teriba. Dr. Teriba, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. It's a comment. Let me just try and remember what I wanted to say. Yes. I wanted to say part of when you were, Dr. Shuberson, when you showed the image of the interior of the palace and the wooden columns that were on the floor, I thought of the essay Ornament and Crime by Adolf Loos, which every student of architecture and every architect should read. If you haven't read that essay, it is not a very long essay. It was written by an Austrian architect and thinker, Adolf Loos. I don't think any other essay has had a greater impact on modern and contemporary architecture than that essay. It was written in 1908, and we are still living with the repercussions of that essay. In that essay was one simple argument. The argument was this: ornament is criminal. We as a society have evolved to such a state that our architecture has to be functional. And functional architecture should be shorn of ornaments. Now, ornament is criminal, ornament is baby-like, and we are more mature than that. And so this is all to say that in attacking this question that Dr. Sugarsani is attacking about the value of culture, you have to look at why is it that ornament became criminal? Because the issue here is that modern architecture with the steel and glass and the way that we create architecture today, it's why those columns were replaced. It's why those columns in the palace, the Athene they were replaced by columns without any ornaments. The issue is that we have to think about the larger issue of why is it that we got to a state in a society where we had to create architecture that was functional, that was devoid of ornaments. Until we address that, what we're talking about, in other words, what we're talking about is incomplete without that larger discussion about how ornaments became unimportant. So that's just what I wanted to say. That article really argues it very well. It's why we have not only architecture, but furniture as well. We design everything in a way that it is economical.
Okay, Doctor.
So
okay, Dr. Teriba. All right. Dr. Tony, you want to respond to that?
Thank you so very much, Dr. Teriba. That was spot on. And if I have to go into ornamentation and this ornament and crime, I'm sure we will leave today, and Thursday will be another day. And I look forward to meeting you personally. There's so much to learn from each other. And what I want to point out is if we look at the artwork of Lamidi Fakeye, Lamidi Fakeye's artwork, at what point, the big question will be, at what point did architecture, or at what point did the post move, the roof post, the post that holds the roof, moves from being a structural element to becoming artistic, because with the Yorubas, Lamidi Fakeye's real name, the compound name is Olona De, and it actually tells you what that family, their heritage, as in the business with which they live. And it means they're actually carvers. So they carve the doorpost, they carve anything woodwork within the house was done by the Olonas. And Lamidi Fakeye has continued to do, and his son that's taken over has continued to do these totem poles. And it will be interesting to see at what point do we just see them as art or as part of our architectural feature as a Yoruba person. I'm so fascinated with the columns inside that church that Demasmoko put there. Because to me, in a way, it's like bringing the totem pole or the post that we don't want to see outside into the interior and make it to be a structural feature, not just decoration or beautification or aesthetic, but exactly to make it to be part of the structural features of that church. So thank you so very much for that contribution.
Okay. Maybe you want to leave that, as you said before, till Thursday, when the members of your panel will be able to throw more light on the question from other perspectives. Thank you very much, everyone. Your questions are noted, and we want to remind you that we will be having this same discourse on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Please endeavor to join us then. Keep sending in your questions through our WhatsApp and email, and we'll take note of them and pile them up for our panelists next Thursday. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for the fluctuations. So, thank you.
We appreciate you, Tony.
Thank you, Bode.